Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jim. It's great to be here.
So let's start with the most important question first. Nuun. Where did the name of the company come from?
That's interesting. There's a lot of stories out there about where it came from. Let me just say this. It's a made up name, right? It's in fact, the idea on this one, when it first came up with the idea, was all about symmetry, right? N-U-U-N, and it was like this made up word, and it was just that was really what drove it. However, the truth be told, we've given it a definition since then, and we call it nutrition uncompromised. And so that's where the NU is nutrition and the uncompromised is the back part of it. So that's what it stands for. I will say, if I could, because I think this one's really interesting, I have to tell a story on this one. So one of my teammates, actually, she's not with the company anymore. This is a while back. This is, 5-6 years ago. She comes up to me and says, "Kevin, do you know what Nuun means in Nepalese?" And I'm like, "I have no idea." She goes, "It means salt." And I'm like, "How do you know that?" And then she goes, "Well, I was in a Whole Foods and someone there working there had literally just come back from spending time in Nepal." And so here's the irony of this whole thing. Because Nuun is about hydration and electrolytes is key, the most essential of the electrolytes is salt, sodium. So the Nepalese translation is actually pronounced Nuun. It is spelt a little bit differently, by the way. It's not N-U-U-N, it's N-U-N, like none, but it's actually pronounced Nuun. So I don't know if that happens to be a little bit of serendipity that happened here, but just
that's cool.
share it.
Yeah, it was fate. It was fate. That's cool. So, just based on what you said, uncompromised or nutrition uncompromised. I mean, it seems like sort of a value. It's something that you guys as a company live out. And Kevin, I could have had a lot of other people on this podcast to talk about culture and living out corporate values, people who've written books on it or maybe speak on it, but like you're doing it, you're living it out. So I want to explore that with you today. How does a company, set values, but more importantly, how do you live them out? Because when you're, for the listeners, like if you just go to their website, if you follow them on social media or anything, like you'll see that like their brand just it oozes like these values that you can tell that they just live out as a company. So what are your values and how do you actually go about living them out as a company?
Yeah, when I think of values, I think of a couple of different perspectives on this one. So there's these value foundational pillars as a company that we have, and it's under this umbrella at Nuun called Live Clean. And those three pillars are around, so Live Clean being clean product plus clean planet, so our outdoor playground. And those two combined lead to how do we get to clean movement? And so I say that because there's two ways you and I could jump into this right now. That's a company philosophy and how do we approach our business, and then how do we live that. Then there's the values as a team that we live in, the behaviors that manifest itself underneath it. And those things could be around energy giving. It's around servant leadership. It's around agility. It's around decisiveness and flexibility, like those type of things. So I could actually go two different directions with that one. Is there a preference where you might want to dig in a little?
So tell me, crystallize that for me. What are the two different directions?
So one is an overall company philosophy on the like the value proposition of the company, and then there's the behaviors of the team and the values that we live every day that
Let's start
bring that to life
from the top down. Let's start from the corporate company values, and then work that down into like how do those lead to behaviors?
So here's what I would say is the Live Clean philosophy has three foundational pillars: clean product, clean planet, leading to clean movement. So clean product is this. The way we're approaching it is how do we create something through this multisensory experience, right? So it's something that's you want to do versus you have to do, right? And how do we have every ingredient in the product has a purpose? And so we become obsessed with that as a team, right? And so that's kind of the tool that we can give you to lead to where it will go to our why. Clean planet is, listen, we want to make the planet ideally better than after we've come into a situation or made an impact. How do we make it better than how we arrived? That's a tough thing to do because if you're selling a consumable, the reality is there's going to be a negative impact. So how do we offset that? So as an example, we're climate neutral certified. Tomorrow, how do we become climate positive, right? And so how do we keep reducing our impact? Because we know we have a role to play. That leads to clean movement, right? And this is our why. A lot of people think of us as a hydration and nutrition company. That's true, but the reason why we're in business and why we do what we do is it's all about getting movement. All about movement. You see, we believe fundamentally the number one thing that you can do for health and vitality is just move more. Just move more. That could be the athlete, competing for their first 5K to an Ironman or marathon, or it could be someone who's like, I need to get going and I just need to get my 10,000 steps in today and more consistently. We absolutely live that every single day and try to encourage others to do it. And so we need a healthy planet to do it, and we need healthy people through nourishment and hydration to get there. And that's kind of the overall approach as a business that we take.
So you have those, up on a wall somewhere, hypothetically,
Yeah.
or it's in the employee manual, like on day one. I guess. Well, first of all, how does a company live that out? Like, how do you make that work in the company? Because you got people got to show up, they've got to do the work, and then they got to go home to their families and whatever else they do. How does this manifest?
I will say this. I was about to jump into talking about behaviors. Before I jump into behaviors, I will say this is everybody at Nuun, every single person buys into our mission around hydration that empowers the world to move more, meaning we all believe in the power of movement. We're all in the different parts of our journey. Some of us are riding highs of exercise and movement, to some are like, oh, I'm in a rut, right? And so you need to surround yourself with people like that. If that motivates you, you're in the right spot at Nuun. By the way, if you have no interest in moving and that's just not something that's part of who you are, like you just, for whatever reason, don't believe in that, then Nuun's probably going to make you miserable. So you probably don't want to be part of that culture. And so that's a starting point here. How it manifests itself is around behaviors, and that goes across all these different facets of the business of clean product, clean planet, leading to clean movement. And I think the behaviors of what differentiates Nuun is actually the competitive advantage of the company, the culture of the company. And these behaviors are things around where this value around servant leadership, right? So we're in the business of people, as Tom Peters would say, people, serving people, right? And that's something that we're obsessed with. So how do I help my teammate win that helps my consumer win or my customer win or whoever it is that you're serving? And we talk about it and live it every single day and celebrate that. There's also agility. Gosh, think about this, right? In the world today, this is fascinating to me. If I think about how fast the world is moving, as fast as the world is moving today, it will never be this slow again,
Hmm.
right? So agility and flexibility, those are key behaviors that we have to be willing to do, which, back to a core belief of yours around we're going to fail, we're going to trip, we're going to fall, right? So we have to be okay with that. It's agility, flexibility, and keep moving. And I think the other one is around energy giving. Energy giving is an interesting one because it can sometimes be, and I actually have to frequently help clarify this for people and for the team. Energy giving is about forward momentum. How do I bring solutions to the table? As opposed to everything is great, everything is positive, because that's not always the case. And I think that's a bit of a challenge that I constantly have. Is I think people interpret my comment in our value and behavior on energy giving as like, okay, this may not be positive, Kevin, but I have to say this. I'm like, you don't have to apologize for this. Just say it. Then let's talk about what we want to do. So I would say that's how it comes to life at Nuun every single day. Is some of these core values and behaviors to make the impact that we want.
So does it start with hiring, or maybe before that, start with actually having something that you are about, right? You guys are about movement. And so so when somebody applies, do they know that? Do they get that sense? Is it explicit? Is it part of the interview process? I mean, like, how do you make sure you don't get the wrong person on the bus who shows up and is like, you know what, this kind of really isn't for me?
Yeah, that's that. I love that question. I feel like it's a little bit of yes, especially if the person's done their homework. Meaning, if they've done their homework on the company prior to interviewing and wanting to enter, they'll get a good vibe as to what this company and brand really means and how we live. So two thoughts for you. One, if you really want to get a feel for what Nuun means, and if you happen to be on Instagram, look up the hashtag Nuun Life, made up hashtag, consumer generated media, and that'll quickly tell you what this culture and brand means. Basically, it's all about movement. It's about celebration. It's about the high five. It's about belonging. It's about community, all connected again around movement. It's not always about dropping this really cool tablet that gives you ultra hydration. It's something bigger. Again, take a look at that hashtag. It's fascinating to me. Made up hashtag. I think there's close to 400,000 posts on it today.
Wow.
I think that's one key component. I also think it's important that our team is clear through an interview process of helping people understand what our mission is and how we bring that to life. One of the examples I think this might hit home for you is I tend to think of our team, me included, as athletes, and our arena that we play in is really the world that we compete in with around hydration and sport nutrition. And when I say I think of us as athletes, what you need to do is you have to think of your employee as a holistic individual, not as a person that's just working at Nuun. How that comes to life, right? So we have different ways to encourage you to get more movement into your life. One of the things that we just recently did is we've got everyone a Whoop strap, if you're familiar with that. So
Sure.
connected fitness and technology. And the whole concept of that one is helping people understand what strain they're putting on themselves. That could be physical, that could be mental. And then what are you recovering like? Because we really want to make sure that they're thinking about recovering so they can be at their personal best for Nuun or for life, for them, period. And that's an example of thinking about your team members as athletes has this incredible benefit for them and for the greater team.
For the listener who's not a CEO and they're not in a position to create the company values and to force those upon the entire company, not force, but live them out as sort of like as the leader, top down, like you live this out as the leader for and I may be putting you in a hard spot because this is not what you do, right? You haven't written the book on this, you're living it out. But how would somebody who's in some kind of managerial position, mid-level position, they're not at the very top of the organization, but they have some influence. Maybe they're managing a team. Maybe they're a teacher at a school, right? How can they adopt this idea? I mean, do you encourage people to like think of, what do you value? Like, what do you want to be about and incorporate that into everything you do? I mean, what advice would you give somebody who wants to buy into this, but like, man, I'm not the CEO.
One, I believe that culture is the single biggest advantage or sustainable competitive advantage in business, in sports, in school, whatever that might be. And the reason I say that is culture is a living ecosystem. It is alive. It's constantly morphing and changing, so you need to nurture it, right? And so what I mean by that is if a person leaves a team or comes into a team or something happens, the culture is like constantly trying to shift. So you're trying to make it resilient. That's one thought. So that's an overarching comment. Within culture, there's subcultures of teams. So this is where your comment of like, what if you're not the CEO, right? There's subcultures within a team. And you can have an influence on that subculture, which then infuses to the greater culture. And there's subcultures all over in every single company and team, all over the place. If you want to use sports, being hockey mine, right? You have your line mates and you have a team culture, but then your line has a certain role in how you three, if it's all forwards, how you see yourselves. You could take any sport. In business, the same thing. Allow me to share an example. I was thinking of this as you were asking this. I'm going, here's one that still sticks with me today. So on my career journey, I worked at, I like to say another all natural product company, Miller Brewing Company, actually now called Molson Coors is actually the name of the company. But here's an interesting inflection point that shows you the power of any individual within the team and what you can do and create a culture of like subcultures within a bigger environment. So Miller is a big company, a big beer company. I had the task of being the leader of a brand called MGD, Miller Genuine Draft. And the truth be told, when I was taking this role, I had several people, my peers, come onto me the side and say, "What are you doing? Why are you going onto that brand?" And they said, here's what their concern was. It was a genuine concern for me. They looked at this and said, this is a career killer. You see, MGD was in a 17-year double-digit decline year after year after year after year. And they're like, what are you doing? Like, don't go there. And I go, I don't know. I think there's something interesting here. And so it was the team that nobody wanted to be on. And I remember this distinctly. Within roughly a year, year and a half, that changed. And meaning we were doing some really cool stuff on our team and created our own subculture about what did we want to accomplish? What do we believe in? How do we believe in each other? You are who you surround yourself with. And by the way, people are surrounding themselves with you, so you have a role. And so MGD changed it. And here was the cool thing that happened. This team became such a magnet for energy because what happened? We did two things outwardly that people saw. There was a lot of how and behind. One, the brand actually went from that 17-year double-digit decline. We took the MGD Light brand, repositioned it, and became one of the most successful domestic beer launches at the time. Another thing we did, we took 2 test markets to try just the base MGD brand and did a test around that one and getting core to what the brand stood for. Had so much fun trying to figure it out. Connected with the markets in Milwaukee and Minneapolis. In those 17-year declines in those 2 test markets, did a hockey stick and reversed. It wasn't rocket science. Let me be clear. It was about, okay, what do we want to accomplish? And we rallied as a small collective group, and we didn't worry about all the noise that was around us. Then all of a sudden the magic starts happening, and then people wanted to be on this team. So my point is, you actually have more influence and control than you may realize.
It wasn't the marketing, at least not in the beginning. Maybe I'm sure there were marketing tactics and plans and strategies and different things that you did. But you're saying it started with like the being, like who you were as a culture, the subculture that you created, and that led to the things that you did, which led to the outcomes.
That's true. Like, I believe this is you've got to figure out your end game, your goal. Like, what do we want success to look like? So that takes some work to figure out. But don't be worried about laminating that, meaning it's not stuck. I think there's a reference that I heard once is, don't think of it like a photograph, think of it like a painting. The painting will keep getting clearer and clearer as you get there, right? And you start moving forward. A photograph, you're expecting crystal clear. And I think that was a really good analogy that's really helped me. And you go, okay. And so to me, I believe this has happened in my career and in life over and over again. And it's hard to see it until you reflect back, actually. But what happens is you create the painting and you get a belief. And then you get the core people that are with you on the team to believe this. Like, we can do this. So then what you do is you got to get a spark. You've got to get a spark. So there's wins happening all over the place. It doesn't have to be big. It has to be real, but it doesn't have to be big. Boom, we got to win. Okay, and this is a phrase that I use a lot. Mojo builds mojo. We got the spark. Okay, now what? Now what? Now what? And you build on it. You build on it. You accelerate. Then you have to adapt or you die because something will happen differently. And so you adapt and then you keep going through that and then you celebrate, repeat, and keep doing that. And I say that because even at Nuun, this was a really interesting example as well. When I came in at Nuun, and some of the board members are referencing me as a refounder because I'm not the founder of Nuun. And what happened was when I came in, the team was really down on themselves because the growth rate was coming down. But yet the company was so small. I'm like, you haven't tapped out. We barely even started. And so then I found some wins with the team and they saw it. They started believing in each other. It was incredible. We hadn't done anything yet. And we all of a sudden changed the trajectory. There is something about belief and then creating action for impact, as small as it may be, that gets momentum that I think people underestimate.
So what kind of recent or what kind of little wins? Like what you come into a company that's on a decline that really feels like maybe they're tapped out and they don't really see the vision that you had seen. What did it look like day one, week one, month one, quarter one?
Yeah. So using the Nuun as an example, when I came into Nuun, my goal wasn't to come in and change anything. My goal was to come in to try to understand what was happening and what was working. I had some hypothesis of things I wanted to change. I didn't need to get the team thinking about that right now. I wanted to try to understand what was working. A good place to see that outwardly, the easiest spot to see that is what's the sales team doing? Because they're out in the marketplace, they're getting displays, right? And displays and off shelf placement inside a grocery store or sports store or whatever that might be. It's going to have a positive impact. Are you celebrating that? Or are you just taking, is everyone just assuming now? Right? It's like, we should celebrate that. Every one of those is a win. And so all of a sudden, people are going, heck yeah, that was good, wasn't it? Right? Like they're rethinking what they were already doing. So, and then they go, well, let's do more of that. Marketing, same thing. When it came to really the execution for partnerships that were in place, I think it was almost assumed it was like, because you've done it once before, it's not really worth celebrating again. But it's like, actually, it is worth celebrating again because you're doing it again for a reason. And what's the impact? And so you remind them of that and you bring it to the forefront. And all of a sudden, they're looking at something which became a mundane task almost to, heck yeah, right? First down. Here we go. First down.
How might you celebrate that? I mean, is it simply bringing it up at a staff meeting? Is it sending out a company email? Is it having some kind of recognition at the end of the month? Or here are all the wins that we had? I mean, how does that look? How did that look?
There's a couple ways, but I think public recognition is a really good way to do it. When it comes from the CEO, you can also just do a one-on-one. So I think it can go both ways, because I think a lot of people don't sometimes feel like they hear enough, or maybe they don't feel valued by a CEO. I really try to make an effort to make sure that I'm out there and I can see what you're doing, and I'm stoked and I'm proud of you, and I'm going to let you know that. And so I'll do that one-on-one, but we also do it as a team at town halls monthly, or weekly emails as well, of just like, hey, here's some wins for the week, but call out an individual, right? So publicly celebrate a person or a team. Publicly do that. Now, if there's an issue, don't publicly do that. Take that in behind the scenes and let's talk about this and figure out how we resolve.
So you talked about the MGD turnaround. You talked about Nuun and the success you guys have had. Looking back in hindsight, it's like, those were foregone conclusions. We're here listening to you talk about these experiences. And, those were, success was a foregone conclusion as far as we can tell, but it wasn't, right? Was there fear or doubt or questioning of yourself going into those situations, MGD and into Nuun? Why accept that kind of challenge? Because I think a lot of people kind of, if you fail at that, right, you even warned by colleagues like, hey, why would you go into that brand? That's a career killer. Was there part of you that was wondering like, maybe this is a bad idea?
Probably. Meaning, if someone someone did say that to me, I probably did have self-doubt that was going through my head at times, for sure.
Or was it a challenge that you were excited about? I mean, or are you just so confident in your abilities, like, yeah, I can turn anything around? Or like, because I think there's a lot of folks listening who are generally successful at what they do,
Yeah.
and they look at around them, and there are challenges, right? There's challenges for anybody who wants to grow,
Mhm.
grow their business to the next level, get that next promotion, whatever. Maybe it's in their health side. It's like, go from a 5K to a half marathon. Like, there's fear, there's doubt there. Did you have to wrestle with that, and why accept a challenge like that?
Yeah. And this is where I was going is, for sure there must have been some doubt in my mind. And I think in hindsight, maybe that's a talent for me, is I don't dwell on that too long. And I quickly move on. And so I can't actually recall feeling doubt at that moment. And that's why I chuckled, thinking, yeah, I probably did feel doubt. That being said, I believe that any situation I go into, for the most part, I can succeed. Like, I go in with that mentality. From a kid in sports, playing hockey, where I was clearly not the best player, in my head I felt like I can still beat you. I can still win this thing. Like, no matter what, I just always believed that. And sometimes it happened, sometimes it didn't. And I think the same thing is held true here. Is when it comes into this assignment, I'm like, we can turn this thing around. This is going to be fun. This is going to be interesting. Let's give it a go.
So there's this belief that I can, but you haven't, like you said, you haven't had all wins. Like, everything hasn't been
Hmm.
easy and successful. So can you tell us about some failures that you've experienced along the way? Because you weren't, an NHL hockey player, right? So you
Right.
must have failed along the way there. What has been your experience with failure, and how do you embrace it? How do you live it out and fail and then still go, you know what? I can turn this next thing around.
The reality is we're failing, I guess, if you will, on any given day. It's happening all the time. The thing is, it's not a zero sum game. As you fail, you just need to recognize there are so many other options out there. There is rarely just one option in almost in almost any case. Again, I'm not going to extreme examples. The best thing you can do is take action so that you're already learning and progressing forward, right? So I'll give one more sports analogy, and I can take it to business to see where I've failed many
We love
times.
sports analogies on this show. I'm always sharing them, so that's great.
Well, so one of the things I took on was triathlon. It was actually a good friend of mine, Allison Fowler, who I worked with at Miller and Kashi, and she's like, Kevin, you want to do a triathlon? I'm like, of course, I'm always up for a challenge and always think I can do it. And I said, yes, sure, let's do it. So what she didn't know is I'm like, I could barely swim. I could barely swim. In fact, I have a fear of the water. And so I did my first Olympic triathlon in Chicago, and boy, I was horrible at the swim. I think the key was this, though, is it basically took me to say, yes, I'm gonna try. Then it was like get into a pool and just start facing your fear of the water and keep working at it. Today, by the way, if you fast forward, I've done an Olympic, done several 70.3s, and I've done a full Ironman, which is a 2.4 mile swim. To this day, I'm still have a fear of swimming. I still have it. Every single time I create my own Zen moment of how do I go approach the swim. Very different from the rest of the race, by the way. So the swim is about my win is I'm going to get out and be strong so I can go into the bike. Nothing to do with my competitive set. And I think that's a key learning, by the way, is how do you make sure that ego and your self-worth doesn't come from everyone else around you? How can you find that inner challenge and inner strength and celebrate that? And swimming is a great example, right? Like I've now got to about the middle of the pack, but I was like bottom 20% swimmers for sure. And I think that no ego really actually helped me get to a point where I can have this fear but attack it and feel good coming out, which I think ego is a big deal here. And I think that's where it gets in the way. And I've done it as well. Let me give you a business example of a failure. So one of them was I was launching a product and I was competing against Procter and Gamble, a much bigger company than what we were, SC Johnson. I was going toe to toe with them, and their marketing plan I could see was so big, and I had this ego going, "We're gonna beat them. We're gonna beat them." And so what did I do? I tried to play their game and spend more money, right, to go toe to toe with them to say, basically, if we spend dollar for dollar, we'll take them down. Well, the truth of the matter is we didn't come anywhere close to their spend. And yet we spent way more than we ever had at that time on any launch. And the product was a failure. And that was ego. I did not try to outsmart them in a different way. I just tried to go, if you can do it, I can do that better. I'll do more of it. And that's a good example of, doing the same thing as your competitor or the marketplace. You're letting ego get in the way. You have to rethink, how do you remove friction points and do it better?
If you could go back and talk to yourself prior to that experience, that business example, what would you tell yourself?
I would say this. I would say find a way to do something differently than your competitor. Don't try to attack the whole thing at once. Break it into smaller pieces and gain momentum. Meaning, start small, get traction, and then build on that. Keep building from there, little by little by little by little. And I think what I tried to do was I tried to swing for the fences as like a home run out of the gates, and I think that was the wrong call.
Which coincidentally and interestingly, I want to point out to the listener, that's how you succeeded in swimming, right? That's how you went from the bottom 20% to middle of the pack. And you didn't start swimming going, you know what? First day one, I'm Ironman 2.4. Let's do this, right? You
Totally.
didn't do that, right? You said, okay, let's start small. Let's break this into chunks. Let's get some wins here. Let's create some traction. I haven't done an Ironman, but I've done a few triathlons, and I use it the same way. I signed up for a triathlon because I couldn't swim very well. I couldn't crawl or freestyle, but I just signed up and made myself do it, and that forced me to learn. And that iteration, that process, I think is important. And you're failing along the way. And for listener, I want to point out, like, Kevin had to fail along the way. I mean, that's the process, right? And can you take that, because he didn't have, his ego wasn't involved? Can you take that and apply that to your life in your relationships? Can you apply that to your life in your business, in your leadership role, in your family, whatever area of your life that you want to improve? Like, are you willing to try the scary thing, the hard thing, the thing that you're going to fail at in order to get from where you're at to where you want to be. And where you're at might be the top bottom 20%, and where you want to be is the middle of the pack, like Kevin said with his swimming. So understand that and adapt that to your life.
I agree. How about this? This is probably more relevant today than maybe any time. And if you think about we're still in the pandemic, so I'll think pandemic, the social unrest and the uprising that happened in America, but around the world, but in America in particular in 2020. And one of the things here is those courageous conversations to be vulnerable in talking about some of the challenges that we have and recognizing you're probably going to say something that's not right, or right's probably the wrong word, might be interpreted as negative or not appropriate. Yet I think what's more important is keep trying, keep having the conversation. And I do it all the time. Like, I've had feedback from folks saying, what you said, this is how it made me feel. I'm like, oh, okay, thank you for letting me know. I'm grateful that you let me know that. And now I try to course correct next time, and I try to get better at it. And I think we're really, I think as a society, we're really nervous about this. Whether it's the political divide, left or right, either group is kind of afraid to say the wrong thing. And I think we've got to have these conversations. And I think that's the same idea as take a step, take another one, and then we'll get to better and best and whatever that might be in the future.
Man, you said it. Punctuation mark, exclamation point right after that. So for the listener, I encourage you to go back and listen to the last 3 to 5 minutes of this episode and really internalize that in any area of your life. It can be, like I said, it can be in business, it can be in your health and wellness, it can be in your relationships, but this is the path, this is the plan, this is the process. Kevin, can you share with us a habit that you do or have done over your life, your career, that you feel is most responsible for your success? Something that you do, maybe it's every day, maybe it's once a week or once a month or once a year, something that you've done consistently that you feel is responsible for your success.
Yeah, I think there's different things that drive different people. For me, there's two things that come to mind when it comes to forming habits so that you can keep going during when you have turbulence around you, whatever that might be. Maybe life is busy and holding you back from something that you want to stay consistent with. So a good one to think about is like health and fitness, or even growth mindset, right? And I think for me, one is, I think I said this earlier, you are who you surround yourself with. So whatever it is that you want to be better at or do something with, how do you surround yourself with that? Now, you may not be able to surround yourself with Jim. So if you can't do that, maybe you can listen to Jim's podcast. So you are indirectly, right? And my point is, you are who you surround yourself with. Make sure you're surrounding yourself with that, and it will pull you in the direction of where you want to be and create these habits. That momentum is key. You can tell I'm such a big believer. Mojo builds mojo, right? It's all about momentum. And so I do that. I do that a lot. I listen to podcasts all the time, usually around the subjects, and my team would laugh at me because I share them all the time. Hey, listen to this one. Listen to this one. If they don't want to, that's fine. But it's usually around leadership, growth mindset, a lot of times marketing, and building brands and purpose-driven businesses. And so I study that consistently because it gives me energy, and that's what keeps me going. The second one is this. For what also helps me is create a goal. So again, this may not drive everyone, but I have this drive when I set a goal for it. That makes me create the plan to get there. Otherwise, I kind of just waffle and move through life, if you will, on whatever said initiative it is. So I create things like, let me give you one. This might make you chuckle. So today I live through a plant-based diet, a vegan lifestyle. And what's interesting is how it started. When you think about the habit that I was trying to create, I didn't even know what vegan was. I actually didn't know what it was. This is roughly a decade ago. I wanted to increase energy levels. That was what I was thinking. I want to increase energy levels. Well, that's ambiguous. That's how do I put a goal on that? I didn't want the 2:00 lull. And what I found and what I learned was plants are much easier to digest to get that energy. So net energy gain versus taking away energy to digest and break it down. Plants were much easier to do than meat, as an example. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll try that. And then I cleaned up my whole diet and did these different things. And I'm like, okay, great. Then what I did was I created this streak. And so I was trying to get to 100 days of doing this. So that's how I created a goal to create something tangible for me. And so there's how I went and I started doing it. And I got to 100 days. By the way, the interesting thing was my friends thought at 100 days I was going to go have this big grill out of a steak and all this. And I go, no, I don't think I want to do that. Hold on. I got to 100 days. Maybe I can get to a year. And so I created a new goal. And then it kind of continues there. And then by that point, the habit's completely formed. And, it just became how I lived it. And that's one example of many, but I don't know if that helped.
That's fantastic. I mean, for my clients who are listening and longtime listeners who are listening, that everything he just talked about was around what I call the environment of excellence. Two components of that environment of excellence are media and people. Like, what's the media, like podcasts, et cetera, are you allowing into your life, or are you blocking out of your life the negative news cycle type stuff? And people, like, who are the people you're surrounding yourself with? And then the other one is, create the goal and then create the micro goals, the plan to get there. I mean, this is, make the commitment and then create the plan. This is these are catalysts to creating the life that you want. So excellent examples, Kevin. How can the listeners find you, follow you, learn more about Nuun, buy your products, etc.?
Oh, thanks for asking. So Nuun Hydration, if you haven't tried it, listen, if I could just say one thing, drink more water. 75% of the population is chronically dehydrated. You need to drink more water. It's your body's 70% water, to give it some context. Nuun is an effervescent tablet. Drop it in. It will make your water work harder for you. But if nothing else, just drink more water. You can find Nuun, N-U-U-N, Nuun Hydration on all the social media platforms. If you want to find me, you can find me on all the social media platforms. I actually have a different name. My name is on there, but my handle is actually called clean_lantern. Clean Lantern. Basically, my whole aspiration on that one is how to be a beacon of light for people, humanity, and the animals that share that planet with us. So
excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. And for the listener, we'll have all those links in the action plan as always. So make sure you grab that. Kevin, thank you so much for making time to come on the show.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you. Had a lot of fun.
Likewise. If you like this video, hit the like button below. But also, what was helpful? What wasn't helpful? What questions do you have? I'll reply to every comment below. And if you actually want to get all of the notes, all of the quotes, all of the links, all of the action items from this entire episode, go to jimharshawjr.com/action and you can download the free PDF action plan. It'll give you all the notes, quotes, links, everything from the entire episode. You'll also get access to all of the action plans from all of my episodes of the Success Through Failure podcast. And if you want to learn how you can actually apply this learning to your life, figure out how you can start getting results now, you can actually sign up for a free one-time coaching call with me. Just go to jimharshawjr.com/apply. That's jimharshawjr.com/apply. It's a very quick, short application process. Find a time on my calendar, fill out the questionnaire, and you and I will have a conversation about how you can start getting results in your life by applying what you've learned. I look forward to talking to you.